This video was recorded on April 24, 2013, at the CRD Planning, Transportation, and Protective Services Committee meeting. In this video, you are going to watch CRD Directors debate whether or not the CRD's application to the Township of Esquimalt to place a sewage treatment facility at McLoughlin Point is compatible with the Regional Growth Strategy, often abbreviated RGS. First, you will hear from the proponents who believe the sewage facility is aligned with the RGS, and then you will hear the counter-argument, and then witness the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep my comments really brief. I think it is important for us to acknowledge the context of the motion, and it's sort of a bit of a circular situation where CRD has made the application to Esquimalt, and Esquimalt has referred it back for review by the CRD as the process requires, and it's an opportunity for the CRD to review whether the proposed amendments to Esquimalt's official community plan are consistent with the RGS, and I accept that our planning staff have looked at this thoroughly from that point of view, and I can support the motion based on that analysis.
Okay, so what did we watch in that clip? We heard from the CRD chair, Alistair Bryson, who's an ex officio member of that committee, come to the conclusion that the CRD staff had done its job, and that was good enough for him. Let's watch the next clip.
Yeah, certainly along the same lines as Chair Bryson's comments. A lot of the comments made by Director Durman and by some of the speakers are quite compelling. However, the reality is that we're reviewing this in quite a confined context, and that is with respect to the application and whether or not it's consistent with the regional growth strategy. And on that basis, I rely on our staff, who are paid quite well, to give us succinct reports. And in this case, it wasn't a very complex thing. It's a pretty brief report with some attached documents, and I support the staff's recommendation. I don't see anything in the report that tells me that I can come to any other conclusion other than their recommendation that the application is consistent with the objectives of the regional growth strategy and the proposed official community plan. So while I was hoping that I could dodge the debate on the treatment plant, at one point or other, all of us directors are going to be pulled into this. And while we appreciate the bigger picture and the concerns that's causing, I support the recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's review that clip. Like Bryson, Director Daly has relied on staff, who've narrowed the scope of the report and given only two options from which to decide. The first of which is to agree that a sewage plant at McLoughlin Point is consistent with the RGS, including the proposed amendments, or to provide alternate direction to staff, but Daly chose not to pursue that. Let's watch the next clip.
Director Wardlin.
Well, I think within that context, I do want to add in that one of the issues was brought up with is it within the financial sustainability for the region. Received an email from a resident who said, everybody should just go do their own sewage treatment. Like every municipality should be responsible for it. And what struck me was, the issue about, well, if every municipality had to do their own sewage treatment, if every municipality had to have their own solid waste dump, if every municipality had to build their own hospital, if every municipality had to build their own airport, if every municipality had to build every single item that we have within this region, of course, that would not be financially sustainable. I think it's also important to recognize that our good neighbors to the north, or to my left, actually are paying for sewage treatment out on the peninsula, and they are not in financial ruin and not heading towards an economic or fiscal cliff. So I think it's important that we put these statements and these contexts in the basis of what we truly face and what we look at through the region. All of us carry certain regional responsibilities, Saanich having the dump, others having. I think it's also important to recognize and it was brought up around this table about, well, we can't decide where we're going to put the resource recovery plant and the sludge treatment plant. It's clear that that is a consultation that we're going to go out on, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. Viewfield, whether it goes up to Heartland, but all of those are, wherever the ultimate site is, it is important that we have this site, which is where the treatment begins. So I think it does fit within the regional growth strategy. I think it does fit within the sustainability strategy for the region. It is old industrial land use that has industrial land use on it. I think it fits, and I have comfort supporting the motion.
So what is Fortin's logic? Most every municipality has its own police force. Every municipality has its own garbage pickup. Is he making the case for amalgamation without realizing it? He's really talking about sites, not services. So let's address that. He specifically mentioned the Saanich Peninsula Wastewater Treatment Plant as an example of how a treatment facility didn't bankrupt the region. First, this is a perfect example of how a single region-wide facility doesn't fit his logic. And as far as cost goes, construction costs were $20 million, and it only serves 30,000 people. You have to wonder what goes through the minds of the other directors who have to bite their tongues when they hear this kind of logic used to support or defeat a motion. Finally, Fortin tries to make the case that as McLoughlin Point was previously used for an industrial purpose by Imperial Oil as a tank farm, and since sewage treatment is an industrial process, it fits within the RGS. Isn't Fortin forgetting that the RGS is supposed to provide a vision for the future? His reference to the Saanich dump was to say that if one municipality has the dump in its backyard, no matter where it is located or how big that backyard happens to be, it's completely appropriate for Esquimalt to host 3 sewage facilities, even though it's only 4 by 7 square kilometers in area.
Thank you. Director Wardlin.
Thank you very much. Apologize for being a little slow here. It's been a long process that's led up to this, and it's been interesting over the last few days where you receive emails from individuals, sincere individuals who have gone to a meeting and they've come up with ideas from that meeting, and they wonder, why haven't we considered those in our discussions? And the unfortunate part is we have considered almost every suggestion that has come up recently. We've been looking at this for 7 years. We've had our consultants, we've had our professional people, and we have looked at and considered. And I can understand the concerns of our Esquimalt residents. There were plans to create a second site in Harrow Woods in Saanich, and we heard about it in Saanich. They were concerned. They just did not want it. They had a whole lot of reasons, but at the end, they just did not want it in Saanich in Harrow Woods. And I understand that, and I hear it. And some have said right from the beginning that there's a better way. There are better sites, but we've never heard any specifics on what those ways and sites are. And after 7 years, we are here today where we are, and I continue to say we have to continue to move ahead. Thank you.
Leif Wardlin is a Saanich councillor who has been sitting at the sewage committee table since 2005. After 8+ years, you can hear his frustration with the duration that this process has incurred, but that is the job he is elected to perform when he places his name on the municipal ballot for a seat as a CRD director. Wardlin expresses concern for the residents of Esquimalt by referencing the residents of Saanich, whose complaints he previously heard when they were fighting the CRD, who wanted to place a sewage treatment plant right in the middle of Harrow Woods, a tiny urban forest. That plant was eliminated from the design. The meeting he is referring to was the Vic West Community Association sponsored forum on April 16th, where an expert who wrote a report for the government in 2008 gave an evaluation of the CRD's project, which he advised against, and offered an alternative. What Wardlin fails to mention is that when that group that wrote the report tried to present at the CRD, the Sewage Committee turned them down. So did they really hear from all the experts, or just the ones they wanted to or were advised to hear from? The CRD was invited to the Vic West Community Association event, but no one showed up, including Wardlin. Now let's hear the opposing point of view. You'll hear from Vic Derman, CRD Director from Saanich, and John Rands, CRD Director from Metchosin. Let's hear what they have to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. with all due respect, I am not going to support the idea that this is consistent with the regional growth strategy, and find it somewhat incredible that a case would be attempted to be made that it is. As Director Young has just pointed out, this is indeed a conspicuous site that sits on the entrance to the harbor for people who arrive in our region that way, and also for residents of Esquimalt and Victoria and others who go to the waterfront, the breakwater, or wherever. Beyond that, this is arguably one of the most commercially valuable waterfront sites that remain in the harbor area, if not the most valuable. And I would think that this is, from a point of view of fiscal sustainability, not the best land use for this particular site. It is certainly, I would think, not highest and best use in any way whatsoever. That is, I don't think, consistent with fiscal sustainability objectives, and most certainly not for the objectives of sustainability for Esquimalt municipality. Beyond that, this sewage project was essentially planned in isolation from the RGS. I have sat at the table for the last 6 years and have virtually never seen much of a review of how did this fit in with the objectives and long-term expectations of the RGS. It is not poised to take advantage of redevelopment envisioned by the RGS, where you might have a number of dockside green type opportunities, but potentially on a considerably larger scale. As such, it is not really in any way can be seen as optimizing resource recovery, which is clearly a part of environmental sustainability goals that we would see under the RGS. And with the rather large cost from this, both in terms of capital and in terms of operating, this will, I think, affect the financial sustainability of the entire region beyond a simple choice of that site. But perhaps of greatest concern to me is this is not consistent with global sustainability, and in particularly with the issue of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. You talked earlier in your remarks, Madam Chair, about the fact that we are not gaining ground in this region in terms of meeting GHG reduction targets. In fact, we are losing ground. We are truly, collectively on this planet, making a very good approximation of Al Gore's frogs. The water is getting hotter and hotter, and so far we are more or less enjoying the bath and certainly not responding to it. I think increasingly we will see, we already are now, but in coming years, not very far away, we will see that this is at our peril. And unfortunately, I think we may need the peril to respond. But this is a project that does not respond anything close to optimally to GHG reduction. We didn't, in this process, spend a long time, unfortunately, looking at the opportunities for centralized versus decentralized systems and the opportunity to take advantage of redevelopment to put those decentralized systems in under the RGS. But we did do one study where we compared options 1, option 2, and option 3. Option 1 being substantially what we have today, option 2 being a more decentralized model, although still with a central plant, and option 3 being a more decentralized model above that. The conclusion of the study, which by the way, we then had to vote on an option direction we would go, and option 1 received a slightly better rating from the consultants on the whole matrix of factors they considered. One of those factors was GHG reduction. Option 2 was virtually 600% better than option 1. Even though none of this had been entirely designed around resource recovery as a goal, there was still a factor of almost a 600% difference, over 500, well over 500%. And that hardly received a difference in weighting on the matrix we received. That's absolutely and entirely inconsistent with the regional growth strategy, and certainly with where we are going in the regional sustainability strategy, where global or climate change, addressing climate change, is seen as an overriding lens in the entire strategy. It should be now. It should have been in the past. To me, that's absolutely untenable. It is the problem of this and future generations, the defining and overreaching problem that faces us. How can we be looking at something that is far, far from the kind of response we should be making and saying, oh yes, this is consistent? No, it isn't. No, it absolutely isn't, and I certainly can't support it. Thank you.
I'm totally opposed to what has been foisted on Esquimalt. Everybody here knows that, and I'm also think that the whole process of the plant design is in question. But that's not the question here. Is it consistent? And I think that's a very difficult one to ascertain without actually having read the context statement, without going back and reviewing the RGS. I think it's much more difficult to say yes or no on this based on the question rather than just based on whether you think it's a good idea or not. I'm sure staff is right that technically it's consistent, but our positions, our jobs here are to take in the broader spectrum of consistency. That's why the decision is left up to us and not to staff. In that context, I tend to be influenced by Director Durman's comments and the chair's comments. So I will not be supporting this, but not with any great degree of certainty as to the actual consistency without being able to examine all the documents in question.
Thank you. Any further comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? You got him, Nancy? Carries.
Thanks for watching this video. And remember that the November 2014 municipal elections will be here before you know it. Encourage capable people you know to run for council and lend them your support. This region can't afford this kind of decision making. And visit stopabadplan.ca to learn more about this sewage project and to find out what you can do to bring sense to it.